Mental Maps is brought to you by Aruka Well. Aruka Well is a functional health service providing personalized coaching through a virtual platform. To learn more, check out arukawell.co. That's ARUKAHWELL.co. Welcome back to Mental Maps. As always, I hope this finds you well no matter what season of life you're in. Today, we are so honored to have the functional healer, the women's health specialist, Stephanie Graves. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
If you look in the bottom of the episode notes, you'll see her Instagram tag will be there, and so you can check out a lot of her content. There's really good stuff on there for women and moms and all the things. But I think, the work that you're doing right now in the world of the functional health game and really working with women, I think is something that's so important and needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And if you don't mind, I'll just tell you a little brief, I guess, how I got to where I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my background is as a physician assistant. But my real passion is my work for sure as a functional medicine nutritionist. So it was about 5 years ago when I was struggling with my own health conditions, daily debilitating abdominal pain and bloating, dizziness, profound fatigue to the point where I was having to take 2 naps a day, chronic anxiety, and most notably was without a menstrual cycle for about 20 years. So not normal things. Yeah. And myself, like most everyone else, I sought out help from my primary care provider, and their resolution was, here's this pill for this problem, or go see this specialist. Well, that didn't really work for me. So about the same time too, I was actually also becoming really dissatisfied with my job as a PA because I was doing the same thing everyone else was doing. And I didn't feel like I was actually really helping people. So I got connected with a colleague, and she had recommended this functional nutrition training that she went through. And again, at that time, I was so desperate for answers. And as cheesy as it sounds, I really love learning. So I was excited about this new project and this new path to go down. So as I started going through my functional training, it was so eye-opening to basically relearn everything that I learned in PA school, but through a functional lens. And honestly, from a lens that made sense. It was like, why didn't I learn this 10 years ago? So through very intentional changes in my diet and lifestyle, over the years was able to completely eradicate all of those symptoms that I was managing previously. And then about 2 years ago, I got the return of my menstrual cycle, which was like a huge life accomplishment for me. And then after just a few cycles, not planning to, but we conceived our miracle 4th baby. My 3 previous pregnancies were all through fertility treatments. So you really just don't know what you don't know. I mean, prior to doing my training, I ran marathons, and on paper, I was very healthy, but below the surface, there was so much stress and inflammation. And looking back, all of these symptoms that I was managing and struggling with was basically just alarms. My body was trying to send me signals for so long, and I kept pushing it down. But then it got to the point where it was just so undeniable that I had to do something different.
What an incredible story. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think, and you mentioned some symptoms that, I mean, even in the world of psychiatry, right, that I see and hear from women so much: bloating, chronic fatigue, weight gain, taking naps during the day. I mean, I know, within your case, I'm sure there's a lot of different factors that were leaning into that. But as a woman hears this and looks in this, what are you thinking if you're hearing those symptoms? Like, what could that be?
Yeah, for me, that was all related to adrenal fatigue, or more in layman's term, burnout. So, the adrenal glands are responsible for our cortisol production, our fight or flight hormone, which is more like a survival mechanism. But it's helpful in some circumstances, like being chased by a bear. But unfortunately, the body can't differentiate stress between, life-threatening stress versus the stress of, work stress, being a parent, emotional stress, financial stress, stress of not getting proper sleep, stress of being dependent on caffeine or eating inflammatory foods or not drinking enough water. So there's so many different types of stress that our body incurs. And all of these things, all these same symptoms that I was struggling with are manifestations of adrenal fatigue, because the adrenal glands, again, not only manage cortisol, which gives us our energy, but it also is responsible for fluid balance. So given the dizziness, and then also some of our sex hormones. So, why I didn't have a menstrual cycle for so long, because my body was in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, your body, it's actually protective. Your body's like, hey, it probably wouldn't be a very good idea to bring another, human into this world right now. So by, again, making all those changes and really allowing my body to feel safe, I was able to, restore balance.
I mean, you bring up like a really hot topic, is that adrenal fatigue, right? And I think that you see a lot on social media and a lot of different things about cortisol. But I think you bring up a really great point, is that you see some people and they're like, well, I'm not stressed. But it's like, it's more than just like, like work stress or life stress. Like you're talking about like the things you're consuming generate stress on the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, things I was completely unaware of. Blood sugar balance. Again, all of these things are huge implications in stress. And then, even as I mentioned, emotional stress, but like stored trauma in our body. At that time, my husband and I had been going through a really difficult time, and he was in active addiction, extremely stressful, but I considered myself to be someone who was really resilient, because again, on the outside, I was like, had these 3 kids and was running marathons and was going to social events, but inside my body was screaming. So even though I didn't feel stressed, the inside was a different result, because we can, we can sustain that level of go, go, go for a certain period of time, but eventually our cortisol reserves burn out. And that's when you start getting the fatigue or the dizziness, anxiety, sleep disturbances, sex hormone irregularities. And then eventually it gets to a point where it's just pretty much flatlined. And many women are literally bedridden and can't get out of bed because they have nothing left.
And how do you manage that too? I think, because I know you work with so many of these people, and I see it as well. The mom, the mama bear who's like, they got kids and they're managing all these like different aspects of life, and that's kind of what it is. So like, how do you navigate stress and all of the other concepts in those roles as you're trying to heal from that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the biggest thing is really just asking for support, and asking for what you need. And so many people don't know what they need. And I think as moms and even as parents, we feel guilty asking for help. And, we're conditioned to be able to be it all and do it all, but that's not effective. So really just asking for support from your partner or your spouse or your family, whomever it is, and just let them know that, I encourage my clients when they start to, again, be very open with them and let them know what it's going to look like. They may have to go to bed earlier and they can't help out with, bedtime, or they may have to take naps, or, they're not going to be as active on the weekends going on hikes and stuff, and really just honoring where they're at. Because the reality is if they continue to do the things that they're doing now, they're not going to get better. So just taking this time now to really carve out for yourself and honor whatever it is that you need. And you might not know yet, but just being curious with what that looks like for you will set you up for success in the long run.
Man, you bring up a really interesting topic in that, because, especially in the world of functional health, we talk so much about just get active and get outside. And a lot of the healing really comes from moving and going. But what I hear you talking about is like healing is also like resting and slowing down rather than like doing more stuff.
Right. It's like, you can't be expected to go, go, go and not do any rest. Like that doesn't make any sense. And often too, I encourage my patients and clients even just to take moments of stillness during the day if they can. Like I am a huge advocate of like the 12-minute nap. I'll just lay down. If I fall asleep, amazing. If not, just having some time to check out, because again, we are just so busy in our lives and in our heads. So taking some time every day just to check out and just kind of get grounded again and rebalance yourself is so key, rather than just pushing on.
Yeah, and hitting another coffee as I have one right beside me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, as in the work that you do, what would you say are some of the biggest drivers right now within just the mental unwellness of all people, but primarily females?
Yeah, I think all what I had said recently, that idea or notion that you have to like be it all and do it all.
Mm.
And I think that things are changing, but feeling comfortable enough to ask for help and know that that's not a sign of weakness. It's no different. We have a fan in our bathroom that's leaking. So we called the handyman to come over. So it's no different in your day-to-day life if you're feeling exhausted or you're just feeling stressed or the kids are too much, to ask for some help. Because when you don't ask for what you need, then you start being resentful of the people around you and getting really angry at them because they're not reading your mind that you need more help at night with the baby, or you want to take the night off from cooking. So really just being human and knowing that we all need help. And it doesn't mean that you're any less of a mom. In my opinion, it actually makes you a stronger mom if you're able to ask for help.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really interesting concept of like community, right? Something that myself and a lot of our friends have been talking about is just so many times we're all so isolated and we believe we're just going to do it all ourselves. We have this really small nuclear group of people around us, but that's really it. And what you're saying is that many times the driver to unwellness is probably that absence of a community and allowing the community in to kind of help you navigate life.
Yeah. And then it makes it feel a lot less isolating too, to know that you're not going through it alone. I've created a program. Actually, it's a 12-week program specifically designed for adrenal fatigue and burnout in moms. And one of the components of the program is community. So there's a Facebook group and there's weekly coaching calls, again, so that you don't feel like you're the only person going through this, and to be able to have someone else who's in a similar situation, share their wins or maybe some of even their losses, if you will. Again, just like humanizing the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so interesting that, unwellness can come from your community, not just like a dysfunctional community, but like the absence of community. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I see a lot,
absolutely. And COVID certainly didn't help that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about like food, what do you think are some of the foods? Because I know we have like these huge umbrellas that we talk about in the functional health world, ultra processed foods or sugar foods, that kind of stuff. What are some foods that you feel like are really impacting people that a lot of women find themselves eating? They may think that they're like doing the right thing and they're actually not.
Yeah, there's a lot of them for sure. But I would say, the sad reality is there's just processed food right now is just, there's so much junk in our foods. And especially when you think you're doing a good thing because it says sugar free or fat free, and then you look at the label and there's 37 ingredients and you can't pronounce any of them. Those things are causing huge amounts of inflammation in the body. And as you may or may not know, and your listeners, your gut and brain are very intimately connected. It's actually the longest nerve in your body. So as we see, mental health, crises and rates of anxiety and depression increasing, it's no wonder, because to see what people are eating and what's at the grocery store these days. So anything you put in your mouth, good or bad, is sending messages to your brain. So if you're eating a lot of highly processed foods that maybe you think are clean, just because they don't have sugar or fat in them, that's just causing a huge amount of inflammatory messages to the brain, which is just going to turn up the volume on whatever it is that's currently there, anxiety or depression or OCD, whatever the thoughts are.
Interesting. Yeah. So just a lot of times, like, you're pulling those foods off the shelf and you're like, oh yeah, this is sugar free, I need to eat that. And then you come to find out not very helpful in those things. Are there any foods where you're like, absolutely add this to your meal plan or absolutely have this in there as a female?
Yeah, I would say really good quality, high fat foods. So, like avocados, eggs, all the oils like avocado oil, coconut oil. If you eat meat, clean, grass fed or pasture raised, all the nuts and nut butters, different seeds and oils. Those are all really great for not only hormone health, but brain health, and also really anti-inflammatory as well too.
Yeah, I
So,
think,
so
yeah.
not to be afraid of fats. I grew up in the late '80s, and my household growing up was what I mentioned. Everything was fat free, sugar free, no fat, reduced fat. So that's what I was like brainwashed to believe. And again, it wasn't until I went through my functional training when it was like, no, you actually need fat. Fat is not bad for you when you're getting the good amount of fats that are anti-inflammatory.
Man, you bring up a great point too, because like, I see functionally a lot of times, like you pull these labs and, maybe hormones are almost there within the functional health or in the Western world are good. In the functional health, it's not as best. But then you pull like fats and like, oh my gosh, their omega-3s are super low or the DHEA is really low. And so
Yeah.
you don't really realize how important fats are to the entire hormone cycle until like you start to add them back in and people are like, oh my gosh, I feel so different.
Yeah, yeah. Cholesterol is a major player in most hormones. So, and just recognizing that, I think a lot of women are afraid that fats will make you fat. And that's like the complete opposite. It's usually when women are seeing weight loss resistance because they're restricting calories too much or they're not getting enough fat. And again, that actually puts the body in this state of stress or fight or flight because it's perceiving danger because it's not getting enough calories. So it's actually holding on to fat. Whereas if you can give your body what it needs and nourish it, then again, the body feels safe and it can release those fat stores and you'll actually really lose weight. So it does seem counterintuitive at first to eat more to lose weight. But so many times I have women come in and, they're eating 900, 1,000, 1,200 calories a day and they're not losing weight. And it's like, because you're not eating enough.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times they're like, "Well, I'm not eating sugars." You hear that
Yeah.
beautiful term, I'm not eating sugar," but it's
Yeah.
not the sugar as much as you don't have enough fat, and so then you add that fat in, and wow, what a huge impact!
Yeah, and the fats also, they keep you full longer as well too, and they're going to, provide energy and help with, heat too. That was a thing randomly. Like I always used to be cold too, because again, looking back, what I was eating, I'm sure that my thyroid was out of whack. I never ended up getting it tested. I don't think back then, but
Well, and you think about from culturally, like you see other cultures, ancestrally they eat a lot of fats, especially like up in the north in the Baltic regions, and they have
yeah,
all that brown fat, and they're not overweight or anything like that, but they have all this thick
yeah,
brown fat inside of them, and so it just kind of helps them stay warm. And that you're not
yeah,
getting that unless you're eating good fats on a regular basis. That kind of helps build.
hmm
So that's a great,
yeah,
yeah, that's really cool. In the world, kind of moving from like nutrition into just like social life, it does seem like, and I know social media and internet's like such a hot topic concept in all healthcare, right? But especially in the psych world. One of the things I think I see a lot is just a lot of women, especially in the last few years, that just come in and they're just really anxious. Like you hear that term a lot, like I'm anxious or I'm overactivated or I'm overstimulated. I hear that a lot. What do you think is
yeah.
the driving factors for that? Is there a connection with that? Or is it something else? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. I think it's just like honestly how our society is these days. And it's like everything is like go, go, go. And, it just seems like so much is demanded of us all the time. And again, there's not that time for rest or people aren't prioritizing rest. Like they're really good at filling their calendars, but not really good at prioritizing not doing anything. So I think it's a lot to do with that too. And, with social media too, like so accessible and all these different platforms. And that just, I feel, puts you in this like not a great headspace of whether you're comparing yourself to someone else or just like whatever information that you're gathering. Not all information found on the internet or social media is valid. So And I feel like it just creates a disconnection from self and from other people, just having, again, these things so accessible that people aren't, connecting with real people as much anymore too.
Yeah, and it almost seems like, one thing that I've kind of noticed is, just that constant like moving, right? Like you're seeing all these different reels, or you're seeing all these different videos, or you're looking at all these different clothes. It's almost like the attention span is kind of degrading, and then it's almost like overstimulating. Do you see that too, like with some of the people you work with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, just people just stretching themselves way too thin and not even knowing it, because they used to be able to do that much like I was, and now they've got to a point where they can't, but they still want to have, like that really busy active lifestyle and social life, but now their body is telling them you can't do that anymore. Like, you've exhausted all of your cortisol. It's time to take a rest. And that in itself can cause anxiety too. And just, not being able to do what you used to be able to do. And honestly, that probably wasn't serving you.
So you're kind of speaking of it. I'd love to hear more about this. So you're not able to do what you once done. And so what kind of what I heard in that was that, what led you to this place was kind of stretching yourself or overstimulating yourself or whatever that looks like. You did have 50 tabs open on your computer. You did have all these things going on. And the moment it was working well, and now you're still doing it. And what you don't realize is it could be the main factor that's what's making you feel unwell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So at one time like, you could do it, or not that you've gotten any weaker, but it was just like you could maintain it with the energy sources you had, but it depleted you to the point that now you can't. Huh.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And, we all, like kind of ebb and flow, and I'll fall back into that pattern every once in a while. And luckily my husband is really good at catching me and be like, hey, like, I think you're starting to like wind up a little bit again, and like whatever that like anxiety trigger is. And for me, if I get anxious, my go-to is to get really busy. And I'm really good at getting stuff done. But again, that's not necessarily helpful. So just being mindful, and you can feel it in your body once you drop out of that sympathetic activation and then move into the more parasympathetic mode. If you were to fall back into it, you can feel it in your body, and it's very uncomfortable. So should that happen, it's a really great incentive to avoid doing that because in my experience, I've worked really hard to feel good. So I want to continue to doing those things that promote that.
And so you said, like, so for you, when you get anxious, and I think I see a lot of other people, men and women, right? So I know men that do this too. But when you get anxious, you just get busier. You just do more. Yeah. Do you feel like it's because it kind of just helps you not think about the things that make you anxious? Or is it just allowing the anxiety energy to get out? Like, what is that kind of pushing?
Yeah, and I'm definitely, much more aware of it now and better with just like sitting with it. But in the past, it would be, like, okay, I'm going to start a new project and, I'm going to end world hunger by like the weekend, or, I'm teasing. But yeah, I think it was just like a distraction because that was always kind of like my go-to as a child, even like, I'm going to sign up for this class, or I'm going to, do this certification, or I'm going to run this marathon. And it was a great way to not have to feel any discomfort that was actually happening like behind the scenes.
So whether it's like in yourself or like with the people you work with, how do you get out of that? Like, what do you do instead?
Yeah. And honestly, it's really just, I think it's individualized, but really just sitting with it and just being curious, like, okay, why is this coming up for me right now? This anxiety. And instead of running away from it, just feeling it, as uncomfortable as it is, because we have to feel it to heal it, a little healing jingle, if you will. But really just feeling it all the way through and letting it come up, and then being curious as to why it's happening for you, and then being able to release it versus, again, in my past, anytime anything uncomfortable came up, I would just shove it down. It was like, okay, I don't want to feel this. I'm going to go for a 3-hour run. Not helpful because those emotions that we stuff down, they don't go away. They just get stored there. And that's really what, again, also was a manifestation of a lot of physical symptoms I was feeling, particularly with the abdominal pain and bloating. It was basically everything I had suppressed for so long. That's how it was manifesting for me.
And man, the people I work with a lot too, we talk about that. Like emotions just don't like dissipate into thin air in the brain. It's not like they're just a gas that evaporates. Like the brain's got to do something with them. And if it's not processing it, it's got to store it somewhere. You brought up a great point that the body can store it too, or at least the physiological symptoms of that stress is going to be stored. Absolutely. So, I know you give us a lot of really good stuff, when it comes to like health and different concepts. What would you say is one of, or maybe a couple of the most important things a woman can do right now for like her mental health?
Yeah. One of the things that I encourage clients to do first, and it may seem silly, is to literally make a list of the stressors in their life. And it might be a long list, it might be a shorter list, or you might not be aware of all of the stressors. But I think just visualizing the things that you are aware of are causing stress on your body and on your life. And then just literally identifying which one is the largest and seeing how you can remove that from your life. And a lot of people, it's work. So if you hate your job, okay, how can you move towards either making the current job more desirable, getting more flexible hours or more support, or finding a new job? Because again, the reality is if you're still in these, really high stress or toxic environments or relationships, then true healing can occur. We can definitely make some strides with diet and lifestyle, but if like the big thing that's causing you stress in your lifestyle, like the elephant in the room, is not being addressed, it's going to make it very difficult for true healing. So yeah, I encourage people to make a list of their stressors, and then it also helps visualize and give them compassion for themselves. Like, no wonder I feel the way I feel because I just made a list of 25 things that are stressing me out, So it can be really eye-opening for them too. And then again, I don't think it can be stated enough, is really just prioritizing time for rest. So whether that's, 10 minutes a day of just stillness, or getting more rest at night or in the morning, or just maybe having one day a week on Sundays where it's just going to be like no phones, no work. It's just going to be a really restorative day. Because again, you can't expect to like go without any rest and still be able to function and perform at the same level.
I heard you mention like no work, no phones, some of those concepts. Like, do you feel like it's possible to rest and still consume a lot of that stimuli? Or is that something, because I know that for a lot of people that can be a big challenge for them. So how do you like turn that down and rest, knowing that that's going to generate a lot of anxiety at the same time?
Yeah. And I probably would say like do one or the other first, not doing both. Oftentimes people try to do like too much and then they get overwhelmed and then they quit. So maybe just practicing a day a week, or maybe even just like setting better boundaries with your phone and like, okay, this is my work hours with my phone, or I'm going to turn it off at 7 p.m. Or even I'm not going to have it next to my bed, so it's not the first thing that you're looking at in the morning. But that anxiety, as uncomfortable it is actually a good thing. So it's coming up for you to look at it. And again, be curious, like, why am I so anxious that I'm not attached to my phone? Like, why does this matter? What am I missing out on? Because it does have such a pull. And there was like a few weeks ago where our internet was down for like 2 days over the weekend, like thanks AT&T. But it was so interesting though, because just having no internet in our house, everything was so like it just, you could feel the difference in the energy and not having any devices or any TV for those 2 days. And it was just like, why don't we do this all the time? Like, why don't we just unplug our router on the weekends? But yeah, I mean, you could definitely feel a difference. And it was really interesting. And I really enjoyed it. My kids complained a little bit, but
yeah,
I think that it should be like maybe something to consider.
Yeah, I think it's really something interesting to try with your family. I know there's a lot of like spiritual practices that do that too, but like what I hear in that is writing these stressors down, identifying them, right? And then that beautiful thing you said earlier is you got to feel it to heal it, right? And so when you turn
Yeah.
down the activation of life, you're going to feel it. And then you got to rest from it. Would you say it's better to get little rests every day or get that one huge nap on the weekends? Like, I mean, is there a better or worse? Like, what does that look like for people?
Yeah, I think it just depends on like what your sleep quality is too. I mean, I personally like to take just like a 10 to maybe 20-minute just like rest each day. Again, not even necessarily falling asleep, but just to close my eyes. You don't have to do any fancy breath work, but I usually just lay there and try to not have any thoughts and hopefully sleep. Right now, I have a baby who doesn't sleep whatsoever. So the daily like nap rest is like required for me to function. And my family knows that. They understand. My husband knows how challenging it is with the baby. But yeah, if you're, someone who's working, traditional work hours and you can't fit that in during your day, if that's not feasible, maybe again, going to bed earlier or seeing if you can wake up a little bit later or on the weekends too. I don't think there's like a specific right or wrong. It just whatever honestly works best for your schedule and whatever it is that your body's calling for. And two, like if you're someone who's working out every morning and again, it may feel counterintuitive, especially if you're wanting to lose weight, but know that right now your body is needing rest. And particularly if you're working out and then afterwards you feel like you need a nap or you're getting recurrent injuries or you're failing to improve. And that was something that was happening with me too. Again, I ran marathons and then I kept getting hurt. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll switch to lifting weights. And then that worked okay for like a year or so. And then I kept getting hurt. And I was like, had slapped like kinesiology tape like all over me. And one day I remember I went to the gym and this older man was like, wow, you're going to be 40 and have a hip replacement. And I was like, wait, what am I doing here? Like this isn't working. Like I hurt everywhere. And this is just silly. So anyways, now I just walk and practice yoga and my body feels great because I'm not putting this extra stress on it because again, much like many things, exercise is good in certain situations, but if the body's already in a stress state, then it can actually cause more harm than good. So being aware of what those signals look like.
I mean, you bring up a great point. It's just, and I think it's good for me too to just kind of hear it, right? Because I'm like a go, go, go kind of person. So it's just like, hey, maybe you don't need to go harder. Maybe you do need to do less. And I know we hear that a lot, but I think you bring up a lot of great data points of like, here's how you know. If you're getting those injuries, if you're fatigued after your training, because you should be feeling good after your training. If you're not feeling good after training, it's probably a reason why. Some of these other concepts of life. That's a really great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can overdo it doing anything too. Like I've definitely overdone it, even doing yoga. So really just have to listen to your body and honor it.
If anyone's listening to this and they're like, man, I feel like, I'm having these symptoms, right? Whether it's a chronic fatigue or it's the weight gain or the bloating or just you feel like garbage, like how can they reach out? How can they find like a provider like yourself, to do this kind of help?
Yeah. Well, like you said, I think you were going to link my Instagram handle, my website. You can learn more about me and how to work with me. And then I mentioned I do have a 12-week program for women or specifically moms to overcome their burnout so that they can live their life and have the energy to actually be able to enjoy it. So that's how they can reach me. I mean, there's so many different functional providers out there these days. So, and luckily one advantage of COVID is all my work is virtual. So, you can find someone locally if you'd rather be in practice in person or virtually, depending on where you are. I would love to support you.
Awesome. Stephanie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the knowledge and the information. I know all our people are really going to like this.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. If you want to follow Stephanie, check out her links on the bottom. And man, you got to feel it to heal it.